And we are live on YouTube. All right, good evening, everybody. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. All right, we'll give it another few seconds and we'll get going. Right, I thought I'd pull up the agenda so I know what we're going to do next. All right, everybody. Good evening. My name is Matt Losak. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. We are the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, education, organizing, and advocacy. And in the last few years, we've actually expanded our operations into Prince George's County and other parts of the state, and we'll continue to do so. But tonight, we're going to focus on some very basic information that's important to all renters. What to know when you move into an apartment and what to know when you move out of an apartment. A couple things before you even get to that point. We trust that all of you are aware that there are some people who are scamming people about apartments. So, if you were going to meet somebody in a parking lot and then give them a few $100s and they're going to hand you the keys, it's not the right deal to do. One should check out an apartment before you even consider moving into it. Lots of ways to do that. You could go online and see if there's a history about that apartment building. You want to see if it is licensed. There is a program in Montgomery County for apartments called eProperties, and I think we can put that in the chat. But the eProperties database lists all licensed apartments in Montgomery County. And in addition to that, it also provides information as to how many complaints have come in about that apartment or that apartment building. How many code violations have there been in that building? Now, let me just be fair to every apartment community out there. There isn't a single apartment community that doesn't have a code violation, doesn't have a mouse, doesn't have a cockroach, doesn't have a tenant who's been upset about something. So understand that having something at all is not a reason to take it off the list. It may be a perfectly reasonable apartment building. People who have mansions on the Potomac have mice and have cockroaches and so on. So some of these things are a normal part of living and need to be expected. The real question is how many, how often, and how responsive property management has been in addressing those things. So we think that that's pretty important. And also, what are the criticisms about the apartment? If you go on Yelp or one of these programs and you see not just a few complaints, but dozens of complaints focusing on the same thing, you might want to take that to heart about an apartment community. Another thing to consider is what kind of construction is going on. Is the apartment community itself going to go into construction or renovation in the next few weeks, the next few months, the next year? Is your plan to move in for a short period of time? Or are you planning to move in with wife and children or husband and children and have them go to the school, but in a year's time, they're going to be doing major renovations? That's something to consider. Another thing is to consider whether or not the apartment building in Montgomery County is stabilized. And there are rules about rent stabilization as to whether an apartment community is exempt from rent stabilization or not exempt from rent stabilization. And if it is exempt from stabilization, for how long will it be exempt? There are rules around that, and we'll discuss that later in the discussion tonight. But first, now let me introduce our staff and our special guest. Right now, we have with us Jackie Mashinya, who's our outreach director, David Mullins, who's our senior policy and research analyst. We have Cyrus Schiller, who is our new outreach coordinator. Just came on, started on July 1st. We also have Tim Wong, our outreach coordinator, Pat Beckham, who does a lot of our field outreach and information tables, and of course our treasurer who follows the money to make sure we're spending it all the right way, Josh Fisher, our board treasurer. And our special guest tonight is retired Battalion Chief Jim Resnick, an expert on fire safety, and of course, training probably of firefighters as well, who will be speaking to us about fire safety near the end of the webinar this evening. So with that, thanks, Jim, for coming, as always, and we will have Jim back again and again because unfortunately, fire safety is something that we need to know and needs to be updated frequently throughout the year. And I think Jim will get into this, but we've seen some very tragic fires around here lately. So anyway, we'll get to that toward the end of the webinar. So now let's start with, you're about ready to go into an apartment. Where do we start? What's the first thing? And I forgot who I said should go first.
Well, are we ready?
Research.
Well, Matt, you talked about some of the research, so I don't know if you want to get into, the pre-signing of lease now, or if you wanted to talk more about that.
Let's go into the first thing you do when you go in. You've done your research, and now what?
Well, sure. If you want me to talk about, is anyone going to talk about a denial of an application before? Because if not, I'm supposed to be talking about the lease here, but I don't want to jump ahead of that. And so this is, before we get into the lease, this is assuming you're good. If you apply for an apartment, there's a capped application fee that they are allowed to charge, and then no additional fees at that time. And once you submit your application in a reasonable amount of time, you should, if they're going to deny the application, there should be some understanding of why that's happening. And then if they're going to accept your application, you want to know immediately what the full rent is going to be, and then what are the lease terms going to be if your application is accepted. Some jurisdictions have fee transparency laws where at the very front end, before you're applying, it needs to be an outline, visibly outlined, of any potential fees. Others are a little later in the process, but certainly at the time, the moment when we're really needing to bear down is when you're provided the lease ahead of signing. And it's important, Pat has been talking to me about this a lot, that we really want people to understand that you have a chance as a prospective tenant to review the lease and thoroughly understand it. And that, that can't be a rushed thing, especially considering how long some of these leases are and complicated now. And so I want to just highlight, it's very clear in the landlord tenant handbook, if anybody wants to verify that, you have this opportunity. Pages 12 through 14 are outlining this kind of lease process and what needs to be in it. And it's very clear that you have a right to review a copy of the prospective lease at a place of your choosing as a prospective tenant. So you can't be forced to just kind of read it there quickly in front of staff. And so if because that's becoming a duress situation, which is not good for contracts. So if we're having any issues about whether for instance, Pat's concern is when we've been having people ask for a paper copy to review, and they're being told that they can only be provided this online copy. I think I would encourage anyone who feels that online copy doesn't give them the real chance that is contemplated in our law here to really review it thoroughly and understand the provisions, and then ask any questions you have about any provisions and get a real discussion. If that necessitates the paper lease for you and you're not getting it, please let us know, because we think that's certainly worth raising. And I think that a lot of the language in here about where you're supposed to be able to review it might require that. But
and David, let me also just throw in something that for people who are going to live in an apartment home for many years, your original hard copy lease is something you really need to keep as a record. And you might find that you renew your lease for year after year after year, but those renewals are not the full lease. It's just a renewal that has a couple of provisions. But your original lease, that you need to keep a copy of, is the operating contract between you and the landlord. So we really do feel strongly you should have a printed copy at the outset.
And so a couple of things at the top about, when you're getting this first lease, you need to be offered a 2-year lease, both at the initial and renewals. And then if the tenant decides that they don't want a 2-year option, that's when you can get into other lease terms, a year, et cetera. And then another thing at the very beginning I do want to mention is I think there is a requirement in all the jurisdictions around here to provide a lease summary that comes with the lease with some of the major provisions, a very well-intentioned regulation that I think is handy if you're trying to review some of the key provisions, yes. But we need to make sure that doesn't make us think that we can skip a detailed read of every page of that lease. And again, they're getting longer and longer. That's harder to do. And I'll be honest, we've seen it's hard sometimes to pin down the property manager and get some answers to some specific questions buried in these leases. But that's certainly your right as a tenant. This is a negotiation over a potential contract. It's your right to thoroughly understand what they mean by these provisions. From time to time, we've met property management that doesn't thoroughly understand some of these provisions. So that is the time to get into it. That is your chance, because when it's signed, it's signed. And that's another thing they certainly highlight here in the landlord-tenant handbook. So yeah, we covered that the 2-year term needs to be, but yeah, another thing that may require some discussion, whether it's a ratio utility billing, how the utilities are billed, that's all things that you need to ask up front about if you're not clear and it's not clear in the lease. Ulta is clear in their handbook that they're willing to review any provisions of a lease that you think may not be lawful, because those couldn't be enforced, but they're welcome to take a look at those. And I think at the front end, the only other thing I did want to mention is there is a requirement for the rental license to be displayed out at a property. And so to Matt's point about what you're looking at preliminarily, if that's not there, you verify. And but that's really all kind of the basics, Matt, I think I had about the lease.
Well, so we've seen some leases that are upwards of 60 pages of fine print.
Oh, yeah.
And, they're very difficult to read. There are some provisions in a lease that clearly you want to understand. How much is the rent? When is it due? Whatever the rules of the apartment community are, what services that you're entitled to, how to break the lease. Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? What do they put in there? And then, of course, there's usually a lot of stuff that is not that important, but adds to those pages. Like, there could be a provision, as we've seen, that they have the right to change the amenities at any time they choose. Well, that's something for you to consider, especially if there are amenities in the building that are the reason you're moving there, like a exercise room or a pool or a business center. And if you move in 3 months later, they say, by the way, we're closing the business center because we're expanding our leasing office into it. You say, well, I work remotely and I need to use a bit, you need to have an idea of what your business relationship is with them. So as David said, if you have any questions, you can certainly consult with us. If you think there's an illegal provision in the lease, the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, OLTA, as we call it, should also be consulted. They are there to provide expert advice on what's allowed and what's not allowable. And some things that are not allowable don't necessarily mean that they have to come out of the lease. It just means the landlord can't enforce it.
And just a reminder on top of that, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office as well if the process, if you think there's process problems, things that should have been done preliminarily that weren't also. So just, please, or unjust discriminatory lease denial, that kind of thing, please also reach out.
That's right. Please note that it is against the law. And we worked very hard on this with the Renters Alliance. We passed what was called the Home Act with many colleagues across the state of Maryland to make it illegal for a landlord to deny you a lease or a place to live based on the source of your income. So source of income discrimination is against the law. So if you're receiving Social Security and they say, we don't take anybody who takes Social Security, that's against the law. If you are receiving a voucher, housing voucher, and they say, we don't take housing vouchers, that's against the law. And of course, if they say that they don't like people of color, or they don't like people who are Jewish or Muslim or Christian or anything like that, that is absolutely against the law. And we want to make sure that you stand up for your rights, and you can contact us if you suspect that you're being discriminated against in that way. Okay, so you've got a copy of the lease. You think the apartment building looks good. What do you want to do next? You want to take a look at this apartment, Jackie?
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you all about what you should do when you're about to move into. We really encourage you to inspect the property with the landlord at move-in and make detailed notations of any problems. And it's very, very important that you take pictures of everything that you're inspecting and looking at. I'm sharing in the chat right now a truncated inspection report that has been formed by the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and it shows kind of a checklist of what you should check for. But I'm also going to share with you another thing that they have here, which is called the ordinary wear and tear. And this is more detailed. So at move-in, you want to make sure that, just for your information, that landlords are required to deliver the property in a clean, safe, and sanitary condition, free of any rodents, of any vermin, and in compliance with all applicable laws. And you can request to have a unit walk-in inspection with the landlord within 15 days of occupying the unit by certified mail written request. And this is the kind of things you want to be looking at. Different items of what's happening in every room: the bedroom, the basement, the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Make notes in the comment for move-in for things that are deficient, things that need to get fixed, or the condition that it looks like. If it looks great, then you say it looks great. But you want to make sure that you're noting both on the checklist, and you're also taking pictures as well for your own records. And I'll get into that, why it's important when we get to moving out and how the moving out walkthrough looks like. But before that, I'm going to transition over to Cyrus, who's going to explain to us about the security deposit when you're moving in.
Thanks, Jackie. So it's very important. The next thing, this is in regards also to it's connected both to the lease and to inspecting the apartment. You provide a security deposit to the landlord. It's just an advance payment to protect against any damage that's not from wear and tear. as Jackie outlined from the resource we provide, if it's abuse, neglect, visitors, pet, or non-payment of rent, that's not covered.
That would be visitors who do damage.
Yeah, unlawful
Not
visitors.
just the visit. They don't charge per visitor.
Yeah,
That would be wrong. But if the
of
visitor
course.
comes and punches a hole in the wall, that's a problem.
Yes. But the landlord must provide a receipt of the security deposit with the written lease, and this security deposit receipt must outline what Jackie already noted, that the tenant has the right to be present at the inspection with their landlord for damages at the beginning of tenancy. And this must be requested within 15 days of occupancy. Now, as for how much the security deposit is, it cannot be, barring a few circumstances, cannot be more than 1 month's rent. Maybe if there's some kind of agreement with the landlord, if the tenant qualifies for utility assistance, for example, then it could be 2 months. But for the most part, no more than 1 month's rent.
Cyrus, I didn't want to put you on the spot on this because you may not know the answer, but maybe David does. Is there a separate security deposit for pets that has nothing to do with the 1 month security deposit? So say you've got the 1 month security deposit, can they then also charge an additional security deposit for the pet?
Didn't this come up? I only remember this coming up in the stabilized buildings. I don't remember what
Well,
they.
I know they have a pet fee.
Yeah, there's a pet fee. That's pet rent per month. I think that there's a separate security deposit for pets, and I'm not sure what the maximum is for that. It may be in the landlord tenant handbook, which is the link is posted in the chat. Sorry, Cyrus, continue.
Yeah. Just the last point for right now. Once the security deposit has been paid and the tenant has a receipt, it must be kept. The landlord must put it in a bank to collect interest. It collects interest about every 6 months, but yeah, it has to go in the bank with interest, so it's nice and safe.
Great. An interest-bearing account, and I will put in the chat, there is a calculator that the Department of Housing and Community Development, sorry to be confusing, but there's a Department of Housing and Community Affairs, that's Montgomery County. The Department of Housing and Community Development is the state of Maryland Housing Department. They have a calculator on how much your security deposits interest has increased on your security deposit. And it has changed. If you've lived in your apartment for more than 20 years, it's a different rate. But I think in the last 15 years, don't quote me, but it's gone down to about 1%. And the calculator can tell you how much your security deposit is before you get ready to move out and demand that they return it, less any damages. Okay, so that's security deposits. And then we have what kind of allowable fees are they allowed to charge when you move in? Tim?
Great. So if your building is rent stabilized, it limits the amount of fees they can charge. So for example, the application fee, and this is even for non-rent stabilized buildings, is just $25, or the actual cost of a credit check or other screening costs. And then they have to refund anything that they didn't use for that background check. The pet fee for stabilized buildings for the pet deposit is $314.88. And they can charge up to $26.23 per pet per month. And then the reason these numbers seem kind of odd is because they start at a certain amount and then it goes up by a certain percent every year. The loss key fee is the actual cost to the landlord plus $25. Now, if they get a third party to open the door, it's $26.23 per lockout, and those two fees can't be combined. Including to the and in addition to the actual charge of the service. They can't charge a fee for a storage location that is located within, that's attached to, or associated with the unit. And for internet and cable, they can only charge the actual cost to the landlord divided by the number of units that are opting in. For your car or motorcycle, they can it only can increase 2.2% every year from the current fee. And they cannot charge a new parking fee without first getting DHCA approval. If you have a bicycle, they cannot exceed the 1/6 or 1/10 of the car parking fee. 1/6 for if they have a locker, and 1/10 if it's just any open bike space. I'll link the page where it details all the fees in the chat in a bit, or if someone else links it, that'd be great. And if your building is not rent stabilized, the amount of fees that they can charge is a lot more open. They can charge you a lot more fees. They still are limited. Like I said, they can't charge you more than $25 for applications, plus any screening fee. And for example, late fees across the board, they can't charge you more than 5% of the unpaid portion of your rent. For utilities, for example, they can't charge you more than $1 for each for the admin fee for water bills. And if you're on a RUB system, you can erase your utility billing system for your utilities. You can ask for the landlord to provide you a copy of the utility bills, and you can make sure that they're not scamming you. If when you sign the lease, it should list all your fees. Landlords cannot just randomly charge you junk fees in the middle of your lease. Things like convenience fees, amenity fees, trash fees, things like that, if they weren't discussed in the lease and your building is not stabilized. So yeah, I know there was a lot of numbers I just threw at you, but if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. I'll put the links in the chat.
All right, thanks, Tim. Let me just talk about some enforcement options people have. If for any reason you think that your lease is being violated in some way, that's the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. And we will put the chat link in the chat for that. And we also have for condition and repairs issues, if you get in and you've signed a lease and you've moved into your apartment and you find that there's a broken appliance or some other maintenance issue, and you first go to the landlord and they're not responsive in a reasonable period of time to make that fix, then you would contact the Office of Code Enforcement. And we'll also put that in the chat. One thing to keep in mind that we've seen, unfortunately, is that when people move into an apartment and they are promised certain types of amenities that are advertised on a website, for example, saying that this is a luxury apartment building that has a swimming pool and an exercise room and a business center and 24-hour concierge service, and then you move in and then those services, those amenities are not there, or they've been taken away. The Office of Consumer Protection has now been given authority to enforce deceptive business practices. So if you're paying for something that you're not getting, that you were promised reasonably, then you can make a complaint with the Office of Consumer Protection to pursue some kind of compensation for what you're paying for. It's a deceptive practice to promise that you're going to get a certain type of service or amenity and then have them not provide it. So the Office of Consumer Protection takes care of that. If it's an illegal fee, for example, you move in and it isn't a rent stabilized building, and you find that they are charging you $100 a month for a pet, then you might find that that is not in line with the rent stabilization law. So the Office of Rent Stabilization is where you would pursue enforcement for an illegal fee of any number of any kind. And I think if it's not stabilized, they would still like to know about it at the Office of Rent Stabilization. They may not be able to enforce it if the building is not stabilized, but they would like to keep track of it, and perhaps they might negotiate on your behalf. And of course, if you're discriminated against in any way, either racially, ethnically, because of your source of income, then the Office of Human Rights for the county is also where you should seek enforcement. So if we have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. We're happy to address them about moving in. Of course, there's a lot more to this than we've described so far, but we're available to answer questions, not just on these town halls, but at any time. We have an 888 number that you can contact us at to receive guidance and information. And also with the county, I gave you 4 departments: Office of Human Rights, Consumer Protection, Code Enforcement, and the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. But you can reach all of them by calling 311. Okay, so with that, let's talk about what happens when you move out. And who's first up here?
Gotta give notice. Is it me?
Yeah, that's you. There you go, David.
Yeah, I was going to talk about notice. So that sounds like a good place to start because it's required. 60 days notice from the tenant is required. You have to do it in writing. Electronic works. You want to be super safe, certified mail, but electronics considered in writing. You need to make sure it's received. But the thing that Matt brought up before about the notice period can be included in the lease. So if the lease says you only need to give 30 days or something like that, that would technically be okay. But what's clear in the handbook is it couldn't require you to give more than 60 days. So the landlord's not allowed to say that the tenant has to give 120 days. Looks like in Montgomery County that your 60 is the max you can be required to give. And there are in the handbook, there's a real good, I'll give the page number here on page 29. It lays out reasons beyond the tenant's control that would allow a tenant to break a lease anywhere in the lease term with just 30 days notice. It also lays out things that are considered within the tenant's control that would not allow early move out. These come up a lot with us too. Due to marriage or purchase of a home is a good example of a reason that you're still locked into the entire term. But now an involuntary change of employment outside the area, death of a major wage earner, unemployment, then victim domestic violence. There's a good list here of things that certainly give you the chance to leave a lease early. Still need to give that notice in writing, but can do it earlier and not with
and your health as well. If you find that you can no longer work, or you are going through a major medical issue, or you can no longer stay in your apartment, we have a lot of increasing number of senior citizens who are renting their homes, who are no longer able to take care of their homes and need to be assisted and are moving into assisted living. So these are also reasons to break a lease without penalty. And we can guide you through that if you find you're in that circumstance.
The landlord's also required to give 60-day notice if they're going to give a notice to vacate before the 60 days before the lease term would end, or then if the lease is ended month to month, still 60 days from the landlord is required. Advance notice, both from the landlord and the tenant. These notices should be being delivered the day before the rental due date in order to not be pushed into another month. And so you'll want to calculate that out and make sure it's there before the rental due date. That cuts both ways. So both the landlord and the tenant want to be strategic about when you're giving that notice compared to when the lease term ends. And then something really crucial to point out is then if no one gives notice and the lease term is ended, the landlord doesn't send a notice to vacate, the tenant doesn't say they're vacating, the same lease terms apply. As we just heard, they continue into a month-to-month lease under those same terms until someone gives notice. And I saw a great question in the chat earlier about then if you moved on to that month to month and they're adding a new fee. So that's in a stabilized building. So we'll follow up on that. But yeah, do know that it becomes month to month and then the terms remain the same. Let's see. Yeah, and just one more reminder that then if you're the language in here too, then about when you need to leave to not get charged an extra month of rent. This we've heard this recently too. The tenant must vacate by midnight the last day of the notice period, meaning that time that you said you're going to be out by, that 60 days you gave midnight on the last day, that's included in that. By staying into the next month, a tenant is liable for the entire month's rent unless the landlord has given written permission to the contrary. So if you're going to agree on a little more time, make sure you get that in writing, just like the original notice. I think that's what my main points there, Matt.
Yeah, generally speaking, remember, you are in a business relationship with your landlord, your property manager representing the landlord. And while you might be friendly and the landlord or the property manager might say, sure, why not? Go ahead. It's a business relationship. So you don't have to be too severe in your language, but you should have it in writing. Make sure that if you have an agreement, especially about money, or a move out date, as David points out, something that allows some flexibility, just get that agreement in writing. You could say, hey, it was great talking to you by email this afternoon. Thanks for letting me stay to the 5th of the month. Please confirm that this is okay, so that you have that. All right. So as Jackie was mentioning before about walk through when you move in, Jackie, what happens when you move out?
Okay. Just as landlords are responsible for delivering the unit in a clean, sanitary way, tenants are expected to leave the rental property in good condition, ordinary wear and tear being the exception. So I'm going to quickly share with you something that's importantly highlighted in the wear and tear. So these are some important hints. Remove any surface dirt, grease, grime, and dust. Pay particular attention to cleaning your kitchen appliances and bathrooms. Remove all items from cabinets and closets. Remove all personal items from the rental property. Sweep and vacuum. Replace all burnt out light bulbs and smoke detector batteries, and do not spackle walls to fill nail or screw holes or paint walls or trim. Okay? We encourage tenants to be present at the final walkthrough inspection. So that means that you must send the landlord a written request to be present, and it must be in writing. It must be sent by certified mail at least 15 days prior to the date of moving out. And you must include your move out date and the new address. And you use that same inspection list that you used when you first moved in. Pull that out and use that now to check off everything for moving out. And we highly recommend you also have your wear and tear pamphlet there, which I'll share those resources again when I'm done speaking, just so that you are on the same page with the landlord over what you're both seeing and any discussions about what they think is damage excessive of wear and tear. Okay. Once again, you take pictures upon move out. This is all to protect yourself when it comes to trying to get your move out security deposit, which then I'll toss it back to Cyrus to explain how that works.
Just before Cyrus picks up the
Yes.
ball, let me just say that your pictures when you move out, just like when you move in, should be date stamped. So anybody could say, I took a picture, look at this wonderful new refrigerator. But if it doesn't tell you when that picture was taken, it's not valid. So obviously, if your camera has date stamp, that's the best way to do it. But if it doesn't, other common ways are to put a newspaper in the photograph, the newspaper that has a date on it. Nobody's going to reproduce a fake newspaper in order to do that. So something that indicates that this was taken on this date. Very important. Yes, Cyrus.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jackie. So yes, as Jackie outlined, it's highly encouraged that landlords and tenants together at the end of the tenancy inspect the residence together and check for any damage that is not wear and tear, basically. And if there is no damage, then the landlord must return the security deposit for a full refund. If no damage, security deposit must be returned to tenant within 45 days of lease termination at the last known address. So of course, then tenant has to provide the landlord with a useful address for where to send the deposit. If the landlord does withhold for damage, such as unpaid rent, or again, anything that's not wear and tear, any costs incurred from a breach of lease, the landlord must send an itemized written list of deductions by mail to the tenant's address within 45 days, again, of the end of tenancy. And failure to meet this requirement means that the landlord no longer has a right to retain any portion of the security deposit. And sometimes maybe you have a damaged situation that can't be repaired within 45 days, and the landlord doesn't have an exact itemized deduction of what it would cost. If those damages can't be repaired within 45 days, the landlord may send an estimate, but still must submit documentation afterwards, once the repairs have been completed, of what the costs were, and pass that on to the tenant. If the tenant is owed any extra money from this, the landlord has to provide that as well. If ownership changes by the time the tenant moves out, the new landlord is still on the hook for meeting these security deposit return requirements. Thank you.
Couple things about that in our experience. First of all, we've seen some abuse out there with landlords who are deducting from a security deposit in order to renovate the apartment for the next tenant. That's not a legal charge. You're allowed to have your apartment painted every 5 years upon request. We just recently had a tenant who was moving out in the 5th year, and the landlord was charging her to repaint the apartment as part of a condition issue. No. Normal wear and tear does not mean that when the landlord wants to paint the apartment for the next tenant, that's not a charge that can come out of your security deposit. Likewise, I think Jackie mentioned normal wear and tear includes little holes in the wall no bigger than the size of a reasonable nail is not considered damage. It's considered normal wear and tear. And the same thing is with your rug. If you've been walking back, living in an apartment a long time and walking across a rug and it has a worn mark from the door to the kitchen, if it's a normal wearing mark, it's not your responsibility. If the landlord wants to change the rug, he or she can do that. On the other hand, if you dragged your safe full of gold bullion across the rug and it's tore up the rug, that's your responsibility. So obviously, Pat, I'm talking about your gold bullion. Obviously, there's things that tenants do that damage apartments. If you've punched a hole in the wall, if you've dropped the microwave by accident and it broke the door off of it, these are damages that you're going to have to be responsible for. Common things like your oven not being properly cleaned. We see so many pictures of a landlord takes a picture of the oven and it's full of grease and black and terrible. The only thing that's going to save you there is if you showed it in the picture that you took when you moved in, that it was also black and dark when you moved in. Otherwise, you're going to be responsible for making sure the oven's clean, making sure the refrigerator is empty of any old food and cleaned. The term of art is broom clean. So the apartment needs to be at least as clean as when you moved in, but you should not be charged for normal wear and tear, or certainly not for the landlord deciding to upgrade the apartment with new appliances or redo the counters or put in new cabinets or repaint the apartment. If you have any doubts about that, you certainly can reach out to the Renters Alliance or to the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs to get their guidance on what seems reasonable. You're best protected by this by having done the walkthrough and the checkoff that Jackie described, and make sure that when you're moving out, you've done the walkthrough again and get the property manager or the landlord to sign off on it. Now, about enforcement, if you do feel that you've had your security deposit withheld unfairly and in violation of the law, you can file a complaint with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. I have to say that security deposit law is among the clearest of the landlord-tenant laws. As Cyrus described, you got 45 days to provide a list of the damages and what it actually cost to repair those damages, and in very few cases, an estimate about what it will cost to fix it, because it's going to take longer than 45 days. If the landlord is operating in good faith, then most people would accept that explanation. Otherwise, the kinds of repairs that could be done should be done within 45 days. So if they don't do that, they forfeit any right to the security deposit. And if they're abusive, they are potentially subject to having to pay 3 times the security deposit in penalty. Now, we don't see that enforced very often, but it is in the law. So that said, what's next? Normal wear and tear, we did that. Okay, have we covered everything? Have we gone through this already? Are there any questions or concerns in the chat? Let's go there.
Can I just, excuse me, can I just
Sure.
say during your tenancy, any communications you have or complaints you have with the property owner, please write that as well. Date it and write it, and keep it for your records because you may need it later.
Okay, do we have any questions or concerns we need to address in the chat?
Let me see here. This one just came in. How can I contest effectively for the landlord charging me $2,300 for unexpected damage to a wood floor that did not cause without providing proof in photos or the move-out inspection report that there was such damage?
So I'm assuming that the move-out inspection report did not say that that damage existed, and if not, I don't think the landlord has any leg to stand on, because they should have noted that in the move-out report, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean it's valid, but it should have been in the move-out report. None of us here are lawyers, so let's be clear about that. But we've been doing this a long time, and we certainly play lawyers on TV. So I would say that if it's not in that move-out report, that it's not a valid charge. Now, you should go to them and ask them to remove that charge, tell them that it's not a valid charge, that you did not make any such damage on the floor, and that you're not responsible for it. And if they agree, have them put that in writing. If they refuse to put that in writing and you feel that you're at risk of being sought after for a debt, then you should file a complaint with the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. What else?
That is the only unanswered question in the chat.
On the MPDU question, I think that if you plan to stay in an apartment, you should always sign a 2-year lease. It gives you the greatest amount of stability. If your apartment community is stabilized, the rent for the 2-year lease has to stay the same for the entire 2 years. So if you got a rent increase for 4% or whatever for your MPDU, it's 4% for the entire 2 years, not 4% and another 4% in the second year. So if it's a stabilized apartment, that means it was built more than 23 years ago. Otherwise, I believe that they have to offer you a 2-year lease, but they can charge you a different rent each year.
But
They also have to in the renewal notice say that the first year is going to be this and the second year is going to be that. So it shouldn't be first year's 4%, the second year will let you know. No, they have to tell you in the renewal notice that this is what the 2 years charges are going to be. But if you're stabilized, then it's the increase for the entire 2 years.
And some cities are not stabilized. I think Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park. Tacoma Park has its own stabilization rules, but we don't have rent stabilization yet in Rockville or Gaithersburg.
That's correct. Okay, what else do we have?
There's a question whether an MPDU is rent stabilized.
A good question. I think that it is part of a low-income housing program, and so it should be below market. And I believe that it's got its own stabilization program, but I think its increases, if it's in a stabilized building, have to be within the rent stabilization law. David, do we know an answer to that more specifically?
No, I was thinking that's a great question because the other stabilization regimes are exempted from the county's one, but that's just the one unit there. I like your idea that if the building falls in, then it would be. But I was worried about that too, that they'd be able to just raise it, but tell you like in an unstabilized. I'm not sure.
Well, it says here that MPDUs are stabilized according to Montgomery County stabilization law. But that's if they're in Montgomery County. Rockville has its own MPDUs, moderately priced dwelling units. And I don't know about Gaithersburg. David, does Gaithersburg have MPDUs?
Yeah, they have their own program.
Right, so if they're within Montgomery County, they're stabilized, according to what I'm seeing here.
Meaning that they'd have to tell you the rent for the 2 years, you're saying then, right?
That's right,
Okay.
and they have to be within the stabilization law, I believe. Is black mold in the bathroom silicone tile considered normal wear and tear? It is unless you put it there. I'm assuming that it grew in a moisture environment beyond your control. You're not responsible. I mean, you should, generally speaking, maintain your own place, and I would clean up mold if I saw it. But it is actually the property management's responsibility to identify mold for them to mitigate it.
But to Jackie's point, Matt, isn't there all? She said something about I don't know if it's an addendum or a notice that usually comes with the lease is about a reporting requirement on the tenant, if they see it, I think, right? And so I think you are signing to that on the mold addendum possibly, but it's just within a reasonable time. How that would be enforced, I don't know, but I think that's what Jackie was talking.
Well, I mean, if I were moving out and in my move out day were that day and there was mold, I would say, I just saw it today. Right? Come on, folks. Let's see.
There's a question about which rules will apply to landlords for private rental properties.
I'm not sure what that question is, Tim. What do you mean?
So someone asked, do all the rules that we talked about apply to landlords for private rental properties? I'm assuming like if someone rents out their home, like a single family home or something like that, I think is the intent of the question.
Well, what we know about small landlords and big landlords. So let's assume that it's a licensed landlord, but they only own one condo. Unfortunately, small landlords who own 2 or fewer units are not subject to the rent stabilization law, but they are subject to code enforcement. So they do have to comply with the code or requirements in Montgomery County and the state. So I'm not sure if that answers everything.
No, but I also like to mention that I did share the room rentals handbook for those that are renting rooms, so you can read through it. It's about 4 pages, but it kind of lets you, it's like a general guide as to what you can and who can and can't enforce certain things that you are going through as a room renter. And any other questions you have, of course, obviously just reach out to us at Renters Alliance, but I did provide that link information in the chat.
I would say if you have holes in your walls, if it's just a nail size hole from holding up a picture, I wouldn't bother to repair it because the landlord is going to want to redo the entire apartment. If somebody, a child or neighbor or somebody has punched a hole in your wall, I wouldn't want to be charged for that. I'd want to make sure that it's repaired, but I'd also want to make sure that it's repaired according to the standard that a landlord would accept. So if you're not good at doing this, I wouldn't try to do it. I might get an outside person to go in and do it properly to make sure that it's properly repaired. But I think it's a bit of a crapshoot. The landlord will be able to say that I want this to be done by my people in a way that is a standard that they set. So you're taking a bit of a risk. But if I did some damage that I didn't want to be charged for, I'd want to fix it before anybody else tells me another charge. Maybe you could do it more economically. What else do we have? Yes, rent stabilization is stabilized. What is enforced multi-unit? Okay, especially if not non-smoking policy that affects a person with a medical condition that is made worse for the smoking in an apartment, circulate, blah, blah, blah. We've seen this a lot. Couple good news and bad news. The bad news is that the property management is not responsible for any hypersensitivity that a tenant may have. So if smoking is permitted in the building and you have a hypersensitivity to smoke, that's not going to be the landlord's responsibility. However, if you find that a medical condition has arisen because of the smoking in the building, and you've reported this to the landlord, and you say, hey, look, so, when I moved in here, I didn't smell smoke. I'm here for a year and a half. The people upstairs moved in, all they do is smoke, and it's affecting my health. If you can demonstrate that with a doctor's assessment, you could say, hey, look, I need to move, and I need to move without a penalty because this place is not habitable because of the smoke for me. And that would be a medical condition that I would argue. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that we've seen that before, and it is a reasonable issue beyond your control that somebody, obviously, they can't mitigate it. Property management can't do anything about it if it's a smoking building. If it's a non-smoking building, it becomes more difficult. Yes, you're entitled to live in a non-smoking environment, but you're going to have to play Dick Tracy. You're going to have to be able to prove that the smoke is coming from a certain apartment. You're going to have to require that the landlord enforce the rules, which can be very complicated and difficult. They're lax. They hate to do that because they like the rent. It usually boils down to if you find yourself not able to stay here because of the smoke and you think it's affecting your health, usually what they do is allow you just to move out without penalty. Which is unfortunate because obviously we think that if you promise and put in writing that this is a smoke-free building and there's smoke affecting your ability to live there, we think the property management of the landlord should be responsible for that and give appropriate warning and ultimately evict a tenant who is not making the other residents in the building healthy. But it's complicated and not as easy as I've just described it. Anything else? Any other questions or comments for us as we move along? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, this is our general description of moving in and moving out. Obviously, there's lots more questions. We'd love for you to contact us. If you have any questions or concerns, can somebody please put our 888 in the chat so that you can contact us and we will get back to you. David, did you have a comment? I saw you getting ready.
Well, the small landlord thing, there was one thing I could add to that. Someone was asking for the difference, the exemptions. An oral lease is still a lease, technically, in like law or whatever. But in the state of Maryland, if there's 5 or more units, it has to be a written lease is required. So just throwing that out there. So that would be one difference, I guess, for a small versus large.
And we would advise small or large to get a written lease.
No, exactly. That's what always written.
Always. It's a business relationship and everything's wonderful until it's not. And that's when you want to have a written agreement. Okay, well, that's the Renters Alliance discussion of moving in and moving out. But unfortunately, of late and all year round, but particularly of late, we've seen some real tragedy in our area with regard to fires. We lost a few people recently in fires in Montgomery County. And of course, from time to time, we see apartment community fires as well. And so we must always be vigilant about how to protect ourselves from fire and from particular issues that arise in our buildings that make us more at risk of suffering from a fire. So with that, let us now turn to retired Battalion Chief Jim Resnick on what we need to think about in terms of fire safety. Jim?
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to the Renters Alliance for all that you guys are doing. Just on a personal note, I'm just listening over the last hour or so to the discussion, the information that the Renters Alliance has for people that are considering being renters or are currently renters, maybe moving and so on. I think it's fantastic information, and it's quite a resource that you all have there. So kudos to Matt and the rest of the group at Renters Alliance for all that they do. Jackie, I'm going to call you out, okay? Because you said one of my favorite words in the middle of the discussion about what to check when you're moving in, moving out, and so on. I heard you mention smoke alarms. And I want to thank you. I'm calling you out on that and thanking you for recognizing that. One of the things, so on a personal level right now, I'm in California right now. I just had the birth of my first grandchild. So my wife and I have come out here. We're actually staying in a guest house of some friends. We're not paying rent or anything like that. But on a personal level, the very first thing I did the day that we came into this guest house, and I'm trying to show you guys there on the ceiling, as I walked in the door with my suitcase the first day, the first thing that I did was I checked our smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. It's something that we've all got to be vigilant about. And as renters, that's something that you guys need to be aware of too. Basically, anyone who's living anywhere needs to be aware of that. So I'm going to add a PowerPoint to our discussion here, and I appreciate the time that you have. And I want to also call out on behalf of the Fire Chief Corey Smedley and the rest of the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service. We do really appreciate the ability to be here in front of the Renters Alliance. So the first thing I want to do is make an acknowledgement and throw out some support for people who might know of or be in some way or another affected by what we've recently had in the community. These events that we're going to talk about have been terrible disasters, okay? And a disaster doesn't have to be an entire county or city or town or block or whatever that's wiped out. It can be a house fire just down the street from you, but it is a disaster. It's a disaster for the people who were directly affected, as well as the family members, the friends, the community, and so on. What we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes is not in any way, shape, or form meant to shame, blame, or whatever the people that were involved in these situations. We don't even know a lot of the final answers of that. So please, I'm going to try to do this, and I'll ask that other people do the same. Share grace and give some people space when it comes to this. And if you or anyone you know is struggling because of losses of any kind, it doesn't even have to be a fire type of situation or something like that. It could be an unexpected death. It could even be an expected death. Know that there's resources for you out there, whether it's through your primary care provider. If you are working, then you might have employee assistance programs or something like that, your faith community. And we've also got a phenomenal group of people at the Montgomery County Crisis Center. And you can contact the Crisis Center by dialing either 311, and they can connect you, or their direct number is 240-777-3000. And that number is answerable 24 hours a day. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So, just some of these tragedies over the last couple of weeks. We've got the couple that was died of carbon monoxide poisoning up in the Boyds area a couple of weeks ago. That was up on June 26th or 27th. Matt already referred to the fire that we had. They're calling it Silver Spring. It was just outside of Kensington, basically off of Pliers Mill Road, near Georgia Avenue and Pliers Mill Road, where two women were killed in that fire. But we've also had some other situations. There's been 2 drownings in the Potomac River within the last 3 or 4 weeks. And we also had a tragic death of a young child earlier this year. It was actually during the springtime in a backyard pool at a house in Montgomery County. And then something which has made not just local news, but also the national news, is about this horrible situation that happened down in southern Maryland, where used but not completely extinguished fireworks were placed in a garage of an attached garage of a home. That's what started a fire. When the family escaped, the father did not realize that a 10-year-old boy had escaped, and the father went back into this burning house to try to find the child, and the father was overcome and killed as a result of this fire. So these are just like major headlines that we're dealing with. So I just want to run through very quickly a few things with what I believe are really reasonable and practical ideas for all of us to follow. When it comes to carbon monoxide, Be aware of potential carbon monoxide sources. And carbon monoxide is a chemical that's produced as a result of what we call incomplete combustion, which means something's burning, but it does not burn completely. It could be as a result of natural gas, propane, or heating oil that's not burning correctly, whether it's a problem with the water heater or the furnace or anything else like that. Also, wood burning appliances like fireplaces and wood burning stoves and things like that, or any internal combustion engine, such as cars, generators, power washers, and lawnmowers. So one of the things that we've been fearful of with these recent storms and the power outages that we've seen are that people are going to start using portable generators. They may use it inside their home or inside their garage, or even if the generator is outside, if the exhaust is pointing towards the house, then we can get the carbon monoxide coming into the house. So understanding what's potentially causing this carbon monoxide issue is important. And then the carbon monoxide safety, or CO safety. Have working CO alarms. And the only way that they're working, or you know that they're working, is if you push the button and test them. Know the sound of your carbon monoxide alarm. It's a different sound than a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is going to give 3 long repeating beeps. It goes beep, 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 and would keep on repeating the beep, beep, beep sound. Carbon monoxide is 4 short repeating beeps, and we're going to hear it go beep, 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 beep. Now, in the case of what I have here in this guest house, that is a combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarm. So when I test that alarm, it's going to do the 3 beeps, which is the smoke sound twice, and then there's a brief pause, and then it does the 4 beeps, and it will do that test twice, and then it's reset. So know what you have, test these devices by pushing the test button, and I promise you it will stop. A lot of people are afraid to test these things because they go, oh, I'm going to push the button and it's never going to stop. It will stop. Push it, hold it for a couple of seconds and release, and most of these devices will just run through the test like I described. And finally, in terms of the carbon monoxide safety, if there's ever potentially, or the carbon monoxide alarm is alerting, immediately get out and call 911. With the get out and call 911, go outside. I don't care if it's raining, I don't care if it's snowing in the middle of the winter, whatever, but get out. And as you're getting out of the home, do not open windows or doors or turn on exhaust fans. We want that home to be in the condition that caused the alarm so that our firefighters that come in with meters can test and find out, was it a legitimate alarm or was it a nuisance alarm? The carbon monoxide alarm is malfunctioning. Maybe it sensed something else that was not carbon monoxide or something along those lines. And if you open up all the doors and windows, then all the carbon monoxide that was in the home goes out. And when we show up with our meter, we get a reading of 0. One other important thing, and this goes back to the just get out and call 911. This is not verified information, but I have heard reports that that couple that died up in the Clarksburg Boyds area from the carbon monoxide poisoning a few weeks ago, that we believe they might have called somebody, a neighbor, a family member, a friend, or someone else, and said the carbon monoxide alarm is, maybe they didn't say carbon monoxide, but they said something was beeping, and they were instructed, just open the windows and go to bed. And if in fact that was the case, that was the wrong information. Get outside and call 911. If it's not a problem, we're going to tell you the home is safe, and then you can go back in there. And if there is a problem, then we're going to isolate that problem, shut off that appliance, the furnace, the stove, whatever the problem is, and we're going to blow all the air out of that house with our fans, and we're not going to let you back in until our meters say that it's safe to come back in. And then finally, in terms of prevention, HVAC systems, your heating and air conditioning, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems need to be serviced on a regular basis. And that's something that as a renter, you need to have a discussion with your landlord to find out what kind of maintenance there is on your devices. Whether you're in an apartment building, a multifamily building, or if you're renting a single family home or a townhouse, find out what's going to be done in terms of that and make sure that, like other things that we've talked about, are ironclad in your lease. Is it your responsibility? Is it the landlord's responsibility? And make sure that that's in writing. And Matt, I'm going to lean to you for a second in terms of that last point that I made. Is there anything else to add with that?
No, I think that they should absolutely do that. We've also seen filters. If you think that your filter is not being cleaned or replaced in a timely manner, you should ask your landlord to do that. I'm more concerned about people who are running some kind of heating with gas. And we've seen people who smell gas and then they're told to don't worry about it. We think you should worry about it. Gas is very serious. We unfortunately have some tragic history in Montgomery County where tenants complained about gas and were told not to stop complaining and so on. And they didn't pursue that in a way that we felt was strong enough. And then, of course, we saw explosions. So, gas is not to be messed around with. If you think you smell gas, and your property management is not responsive in a way that resolves the problem in a common sense, safe kind of way, please reach out to us. And of course, reach out to the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs or Code Enforcement. And if you don't think that they're being responsive to your gas issue, come back to us and we'll see that they are.
And on the immediate situation, we can't tell with our noses if there is a tremendous amount of gas or the tiniest leak, which wouldn't even support something burning. All we know is that we smell that chemical that's added to natural gas. So if you smell gas, get out, call 911 or call the gas company, and they will answer this phone 24 hours a day. And they will send out a crew. And usually the gas company, if they get the call, they call 911 also, because we're going to get there quicker with our meters and so on, at least start to figure out what needs to be done to mitigate. And again, it could be that there is such a tiny pinhole type of a leak that it's not enough gas to support anything burning or exploding. But until you know, you don't know. Thank you for that, Matt. All right. Number two, going back to the situation that we saw on the river, drowning. Now, the first thing I want to call out, if you look at the slide that I have here, at the top, that picture of the hand going up, that's not what drowning looks like. Okay. What most of us think that we've heard, seen, whatever over the years, watching movies or what TV shows of people drowning, that is not what it looks like. So it's important to understand that. I mention this because as residents of Montgomery County or elsewhere, we have things around us. We have pools, lakes, ponds. We have bathtubs. We have buckets. And you might go on vacation to a river or an ocean. We have, of course, the Potomac and the Patuxent River. We've got Rock Creek and so on. And also there's flash floods. And that's been a major concern this past week or so. So how do people drown? Because people are going where they shouldn't be going, and they're going when they shouldn't be going. We've heard the saying, the mantra, turn around, don't drown. That's a real thing, okay? If you're driving and we're in the middle of one of these significant thunderstorms and you cannot see the road because water is there in front of you, do not risk it, because the surface might look flat, but there could be significant movement of water just under the surface. There might have been where the road has actually been undermined and the road might not be there anymore. So when it comes to driving, turn around, don't drown. When it comes to these swimming types of situations, we need to be aware of where people could be that they could drown. We need to watch out in particular for folks who are at greater risk, children or youth, especially those who are unattended. elderly people who might have medical conditions when they're swimming or have other types of things like that. And also I want to call out people with cognitive or physical disabilities, and in particular, people with autism. We know that people with autism and other developmental diseases, intellectual and developmental disabilities, I'm sorry, not diseases, but disabilities, they are often attracted to the water. So we have to be aware of who these people are and what puts people at risk. We need to watch any of those at-risk people. We should never be swimming alone, even in a swimming pool, and consider life jackets for everybody, old, young, or whatever. I don't know if you guys heard the story, but in New Jersey, off the coast of New Jersey, just I believe it was on July 4th, there was a fire department boat that was on patrol watching a boat parade in the Atlantic Ocean, and a whale came up from underneath and it knocked the fireboat. It completely flipped over this fireboat, and the fireboat sank, and these firefighters that were on the boat were not wearing life jackets at the time. And fortunately, there were other boaters around who could quickly go there and help retrieve these people. But you never know what's going to happen. For the same reason we wear seatbelts when we're in a car, wear a life jacket when you're around water. When it comes to fires, okay, we want to talk about prevention, including electrical situations. That also includes rechargeable batteries, like the batteries you have for your cell phones and other types of devices like that, laptops and so on. We want to be smart about our cooking and never leave cooking unattended. We wish people wouldn't smoke, but if they do smoke, they've got to smoke responsibly. And then there's other things that can cause fires, things like lightning, even fireworks and things like that. So think about prevention with all of those things. The best fire safety tip is to have working smoke alarms in the correct locations. And as renters, you need to check that when you're moving in. I heard something about changing out batteries or whatever like that as you're leaving. But while you are in your home, you need to check your smoke alarms at least every 6 months by pushing that button. Change your clocks, check your alarms. When I come home in a few weeks from California, I will have been away from my home for almost 2 months. And the first thing that I'm going to do when I walk into my house with my suitcase is get a yardstick or get a broom and walk around my house and test my smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. And then finally, fire escape plans. You need to have plans A, B, and C. Plan A is your quickest, easiest, normal way of getting out, which is probably going downstairs and out your front door or out of your apartment to whichever way the closest exit is. Feel the door before you open it. When you get in the hallway, check for smoke. If there is smoke that you cannot see through, then don't proceed into that hallway. Instead, close your door, close another door if you can't get back into a bedroom, a bathroom, or any place where you can close a door and call 911. But if you can get out, do so. Plan B is getting out another way. So if I couldn't get out the door over here, maybe I'm going to consider going out of a window or something along those lines. And then plan C is kind of what I already mentioned. If you can't get out for any reason at all, get behind as many closed doors as possible, call 911 and tell them where you are. The next part of those fire safety plans is to get out and stay out. Do not go back in. And again, we're mentioning about this gentleman who died trying to rescue his son who was already out of the house. So with your fire escape plan, know where your meeting place is, know where you're going to go ahead of time, and everyone in your household has to communicate that, not during a fire, but like tonight at dinner. Hey, if there's a fire, I'm going to meet in the front parking lot of our apartment building by our parking space, or something along those lines. The mailbox, the telephone pole, whatever it happens to be. And finally, make sure you include pets in your fire escape plans. We've had 2 situations in the last 6 months or so in Montgomery County. One resulted in a fatality, and the other is damn near a fatality. Both of these situations, people had gotten out of the home, realized that they might have a pet back inside the home, and re-entered the home. If you don't include your pets as part of your plan, you're missing one of the most important things. Now, if you can't get the pet to come with you, or you're in a different part of the home or something like that, get out, and when you call 911 or when the first fire truck pulls up, tell them the humans are out, but there's 1 dog, 2 cats, 3 ferrets, whatever, okay? And where they might be. You can tell that to 911, who will relay it to the firefighters, or you can tell the firefighters when they first arrive. We take care of all living creatures. We start with the ones with 2 legs, then we go to the ones with 4 legs, and we will do everything we can do to save them, to resuscitate them, and so on. Last but not least, I appreciate your time and attention. Remember, like it says in the bottom right-hand corner here, if you have any questions, concerns, and this is basically echoing what we've heard from Renters Alliance about other things having to do with rent and renters' rights and things like that. If you have questions, concerns, whatever, about your smoke alarms, your carbon monoxide alarms, and so on, we can do a free home safety check. We can have a firefighter come on an appointment basis to help you check these devices and make sure you're safe. And you can do that by calling 311. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Very important information. We will have you back again in the fall when we get into the next to repeat what needs to be repeated again and again and again, and also to address issues that we begin to see in the fall. Quick question, not that I have any or anybody I know has any, but if you have a bunch of fireworks in your closet that you want to get rid of, well, how do we do that?
The short answer is don't have them. But if you are aware that you find fireworks or other things like that, we would probably ask that you not transport them. But what we would ask you to do is call the fire department's non-emergency number. That's actually the same number as the police non-emergency number. It's 301-279. Oh, hold on a second. Yeah, 301-279-8000. Yes.
It's that new grandkid keeping you up at night. That's what's going on.
You're right, Jim. It's 279-8000.
8,000. And when you call them, tell them, hey, I have found this. What we're going to do is we're going to send someone from the fire marshal's office, from the fire investigators. They are also the bomb squad technicians. You're not going to get in trouble, but those are the people who can handle that stuff safely and can dispose of that stuff safely.
I'm just thinking of all those good citizens out there and parents whose kids have extra fireworks that they want to get rid of. And of course, we know that they're dangerous to keep around. And if there's a way without it putting one at risk of being in trouble to get rid of them, that's good to know.
Yep. We even though the person is the fire marshal, they are not there to get you in trouble. They're there to help keep you safe.
And I'm sure they have a great fireworks display at their beach house every year. So yeah. Jim, we thank you so much. It's very important information. And frankly, it's information that could save people's lives. And so we very much appreciate it. And we appreciate your service to Montgomery County and to all of your colleagues who are putting themselves on the line often to save people's lives. So thank you very much. So with that, let's just quickly whip through some things that we tell everybody at the end of our town halls. Jackie, let's do Alta real quick.
Okay, so the Office of Landlord-Tenant Affairs, also known as ALTA, is the one that is charged with informing both the public of their general rights and responsibilities of tenants and landlords and helping them resolve disputes amicably. It is their goal to provide as much information as possible to avoid any problems and to make the landlord-tenant relationship work as well as possible. They also provide several resources, including the Landlord-Tenant Handbook, Ordinary Wear and Tear booklet, which have been shared with you today, information regarding the eviction process, rights of those who rent rooms, and sample leases. If you have a complaint, a tenant organization, or a landlord who believes there's been a violation of landlord-tenant law is free to file a formal complaint with the Office of Landlord-Tenant Affairs. They will then investigate the complaint and provide mediation. Okay, so before you file a complaint, please try to work with your landlord first, or if your landlord, please try to work with your tenant first before filing a complaint. You file a complaint 2 ways with the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs: in person at their office in Rockville, or online using the online complaint form, which I will share here in the chat. If you just have general questions about whether the issue you have is enforceable, not enforceable, you can also just call MC 311 and they can answer your questions, or you could just email them at ulta.intake@montgomerycountymd.gov. All right.
Okay, code enforcement, Tim.
Great. So code enforcement deals with making sure that your rental unit meets basic health and safety standards, heat, water, working smoke detectors, structural issues, and they will hold your landlords accountable if they don't make those repairs. So if you have things like you don't have heat or air conditioning or hot water, mold, pests, missing detectors, you can reach out to code enforcement. During the summer months, they're required to keep your unit under 80 degrees. So if your AC is not working, let your management know. And if they don't respond in a reasonable amount of time, reach out to co-inspection. And for like all the issues, you should reach out to your management first, and after a reasonable amount of time, reach out to co-inspection. And everything, what is reasonable amount of time depends on what the issue is. For emergencies, it's a lot shorter turnaround, like maybe 24 hours. If it's something like your like your dishwasher is broken, I would give them a little bit more time with that. The cities of Rockville and Gaithersburg has their own code enforcement. But if you're in the county, you can call 311 or visit the co-inspection website, which we'll link in the chat, to report violations.
Great. Jackie, we're going to go back to you for rent stabilization.
Great. All right. So the Office of Rent Stabilization is the one that enforces the rent stabilization law that took effect July 2024. This law promotes housing stability in Montgomery County, where ensuring landlords maintain a fair return on their investment. Please keep in mind that the city of Rockville and the city of Gaithersburg, which are both their own municipalities, do not have rent stabilization. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about this. Okay, so the increase is based on CPIU or inflation plus 3% or flat 6%, whichever is lower. If the landlord increases rent by amount less than the allowable increase, they may save or bank the unused dollar amount for future increases. Please note that July 1st of this month, the new rent stabilization rate is 5.2% and is effective until the end of June 2027. To be rent stabilized, your building has to be 23 years of the year built. So that means that if your building was built 23 years ago, January 1st of this year, it became rent stabilized, okay? There are a few exemptions here. Unless otherwise exempt, all county licensed residential units that are 23 years old are rent stabilized. A unit is exempt if it meets certain conditions. For a full complete list, we'll share that on the rent stabilization website. But a unit that is owned by a natural person or someone who's 2 or few rental units is not stabilized. A unit reserved for low and moderate income tenants under the county government regulatory agreement is not rent stabilized. And like I mentioned before, the rental units located in the following municipalities: Gaithersburg, Rockville, Tacoma Park, towns of Barnesville, and Laytonsville. And there's also fees associated with rent stabilization. Tim covered them, some of them at the beginning of this, but I'll just quickly note that you can't be charged no more than $25 for an application fee. And for example, like a lost key fee, no more than the cost of the actual duplication plus 25%, all of which you can find on the Office of Rent Stabilization website that Matt just shared. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David, in 1 minute or less, ACE.
Stands for Access to Counsel in Evictions. Maryland renters who cannot afford an attorney can get free legal representation. the day of their hearing or in advance by calling 211 and being referred to a legal service provider. Here in Montgomery County, it'll be either legal aid or community legal services. Same thing, or CASA, if you're down there at court. There are lawyers from those places there who can represent you. And as we said before, there's notice to vacate if the landlord wants you out, but they have to go through the court process to do an eviction, whether it's for that or failure to pay rent. So tenants have that resource. Last thing I'll say is the second floor of the district court has the self-help center. They do not represent people, but the court help center can help prepare cases for things like all the applications and the forms and necessary things.
Terrific. Thank you, David. As all of you know, we just went through our primary election season. That was over June 23rd. And we thank everybody who ran for office. But the real election, the complete election, is not until November. So we urge people to do what, Pat?
Always vote. You have plenty of time to do your due diligence and find out which legislators are helpful to renters. So I want to say that, as well as if your building is thinking about it, would like to, and we encourage you to get a tenants association, let us know and we'll be glad to come by and support you in any way. That's what we do.
Thank you, Pat. And if you want a Renters Alliance, I'm a renter and I vote button, email us at info@rentersalliance.org. So with that, we like to end on time. I want to thank everybody, especially our special guest, Jim Resnick, but all of our staff here for providing this information, our treasurer, Josh Fisher. And I want to thank you all for coming out. Our next town hall is on July 22nd, subject to be determined. We look forward to seeing you all. Please inform your neighbors about the availability of these town halls. And this town hall is recorded and on YouTube. Thank you.